Jeremy Pryor, welcome back to Let's Parent on Purpose. It's been a couple years. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Excited to be back.
Yeah. So, any life updates? Anything going on new and interesting in your world?
Yeah, so we are in the thick of grandparenting now. So we've got
Oh,
three
fun.
grandkids, another one on the way. So we've really enjoyed this transition. We're living in our 4-generation house. My parents are
Oh,
living
wow.
with us. Two of our adult kids. We've got kind of different living spaces, so we get to see the grandkids, all three grandkids, basically every day. Working with our kids in business and ministry stuff. So yeah, life's really really good. Definitely enjoying this transition and being kind of in this generation. Like I wasn't quite sure exactly how this would feel, but
Uh-huh.
it has been the best so far for sure.
So, are all of your kids graduated at this point?
Yeah, we got one still in high school.
Okay.
So four are graduated. So Elisa, so our kids, our oldest Kelsey, she lives across the street with her husband Matthew. Our oldest son Jackson works with me full time. They live in our we have kind of 4 apartments in our house. So they live with their daughter and our daughter-in-law Angel, and then our third Sydney. She's the one expecting. She's due basically any day. And so her husband Kobe started a construction business with our other son-in-law Matthew. So they work together every day, and we do lots of work with them. That's been awesome. And then we got 2 that are unmarried. Elisa, who's just turning 20 in the next day, and so she's doing lots and lots of work with us. And then Kyra, who's our 17-year-old, and she's a junior in high school.
Okay. So, this is a great intro because if somebody maybe didn't catch our others or kind of forgot context, their eyes are probably wide open right now. What in the world? You've got 4 generations and all of these people right in the same house or right next
Yes.
door. This is a great segue into philosophically, what in the world are you doing? Because it doesn't feel anything like. It's like, okay, we love family, but you really love family. What is going on here? Um,
Yes.
what's the long term thing that you guys are into here?
Yeah. Kind of the short version is I actually wasn't very excited about family for a long time. I grew up in the Seattle area. I saw a kind of family that I was excited about when I was living in the Middle East. So
Hmm.
I was living there. I met my wife. We were both students in Jerusalem. And I encountered both in the Arab and Jewish families these incredible multi-generational families. And the thing that blew my mind was the people who were most excited about family in Middle Eastern culture were the fathers.
Huh.
They were so excited to have kids, so excited to be around their family. And in the Arab context, they live in these basically these multi-generational houses. I have a
Hmm.
friend who grew up in Jericho in the Middle East, and he always jokes with me. He's like, you guys live just like everyone I knew growing up. And so they basically, where every generation lives on a different floor of the house.
Okay.
Within the kind of Jewish context, they often will have separate houses, but they get together every single week for their Sabbath dinner.
Hmm.
And that was incredibly inspirational for us. We'll talk about that, I know, in this podcast. But I never got over it. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could build a different kind of family. I wasn't excited to build the, super fragile, hyper individualistic Western family that I saw everywhere growing up. And so I was like, what if we just change the kind of family, that we decided to build? So we did a deep dive on how family's done in different cultures, different parts of the world. And we began to think about family, and we saw everything that we saw in those cultures. We also saw reflected in the Bible, that the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, when it talks about family, assumes you're going to build these kind of multi-generational family teams. That's what God describes in Genesis 1. That's the kind of family Abraham built in Genesis 12. That's the kind of family Paul reinforces in 1 Timothy 5. And so we said, let's build that kind of family. That seems way more sustainable, way more exciting. We had a ton of questions like, okay, does that crush everyone's individual freedom? Like, we work through a lot of that stuff. We're not very controlling or religious as a family in terms of just like rule following or legalism. We just are like, we're very captured by the beauty of it. We're like, man,
Mm.
like, why wouldn't you want to spend more time with the people that are most important in your life? Why not create the kind of work life, for example? Why not create the kind of house where, and so none of our kids, none of them, we said, hey, you guys have to live with us. You have to work with us. We just said to our kids, like, let's build let's really love each other well. And then let's create the kind of lifestyle where if you choose, you and your husband or wife, as you guys are getting married, if you chose to work with us or live with us, you could, but there's
Mm.
zero pressure, zero obligation. We expect our kids to, kind of come and go, and as whatever is best for their branch of the family. But yeah, it's an option if they want to live with us. It's an option if they want to work with us. And so we've already seen sort of that coming and going. Our kids have lived in South Africa and in Norway and in California. But yeah, now they've all moved back and are raising their kids close by. So it's been awesome. And yeah, my parents live here as well. So that's been incredibly meaningful. They used to live in Seattle and they moved here about 15 years ago, and they moved into our house like 7 years ago. So
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of our lifestyle.
So it reminds me very heavily. I've gotten to travel to India quite a bit, and
Yes.
you see this over there where there's multiple generations in a house, and a lot of this over there is economically driven,
Right.
where you just don't have this ability for everybody to have their own independent dwelling
Right.
place.
Yes.
The pay won't support it for most people,
That's right.
and that makes me think that historically speaking. A lot of what you were talking about, multi-generational teams, multi-generational families with some kind of mission. One of those primary missions was survival. So
Right.
like the reason that your integrated generations of family was so important is because nothing like a nuclear family could have withstood the elements, the social pressures, the financial pressures, the all of that stuff. And so you needed the wisdom of the older generations
Yes.
and the skill and the backbone of the middle generations. But even those younger generations, very much like you think even in the United States 150 years ago, everybody on a farm had a real
Right.
on that
That's
farm.
right.
And like you needed big families, otherwise we were going to go down. Now we're in a culture where there's the economic ability
Right.
for families and even individuals a lot of time to separate so much. Although it's interesting, we're trending back to where
Yes.
it's not near as economically viable
Right.
for young people to lunch out, buy their own home and everything. But I think what's interesting is that economic viability doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best and healthiest model,
Right.
like for sustainable, healthy living in life for
That's right.
everybody to be able to be so hyper independent.
Yes. Well said. And yeah, David Brooks put it this way. He said, when Americans become wealthy, they purchase loneliness. And
Oh,
that is the
wow,
trajectory
man.
all of us are on. We are basically saying,
Cool.
look, if you give me, if I can make 2 or 3 times more money, I'm going to be 2 or 3 times more isolated. That is our trajectory. We don't realize we're doing it to ourselves, but we are. And that's why there's sort of a mixed blessing, like you're describing, about what's happening with the economy. The average person was buying a house. The first time home buyer was around, I think, 30 years of age, about 20 years ago. Today, it's 38 years of age. That's an
Mm,
incredible distance. And
yeah.
so, yeah, we're seeing a generation give rise to a generation that, is going to struggle more financially than their parents. And I don't want this to be an economic necessity. Like
Hmm.
I would love to see people have plenty of resources to be able to afford, whatever kind of lifestyle they feel God's called them to. But the problem is that we have been infected with this disease of hyper individualism and thinking that freedom is the ultimate goal. Freedom's great, but what happened, I think, to our culture post-industrial revolution is that the one value that Americans could agree on was freedom, and we
Hmm.
sort of defined freedom as like my ability to indulge, whatever impulsive desires I have. Well, once you make that the highest value, and once that makes an incredible consumer, but that makes a terrible person in terms of like deep love relationships, like
Hmm.
biblical love. And so part of what we need to do is demote freedom from being, and especially that definition of freedom, from being the very highest in our hierarchy. Love is more important than that kind of freedom. Truth is more important than that kind of freedom. Family is more important than that kind of freedom. Freedom is important. Like, we fought revolutions over freedom. We want to be free. I love freedom. I celebrate the 4th of July, but like we have obsessed way too much on this one value, and we are willing to sacrifice everything. And this is really a political move, I think, in our culture. And that is that because that's the one value that Americans can all agree is important, that is the one value that both political parties are obsessing. And so we're
Mm.
just a deluge of information about the importance of and the value of freedom and giving you more freedom, more economic freedom, more like it's just like it's so over the top and so much, and we don't realize that we're in this trajectory, right, towards purchasing loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And until people, like, they're cutting off parents, they're cutting off their kids, people are just getting more and more isolated, and then they're dying alone, and we're confused why that's happening. We don't, and we have the answer. We have the gospel. We have incredible instruction from the Lord. We have the Holy Spirit. We have the ability to heal relationships, but our relationships in the Christian church are very similar in terms of family. We have the same blueprint of family. We tend to get swept up in the same obsession around freedom, and it is doing a number on our family. So that's why I started looking, and as a 23-year-old single guy, I sort of saw this. Growing up in Seattle, there was so much divorce. I was a youth pastor, and I just saw
Mm-hmm.
the incredible brokenness within family. I was losing a lot of hope in it. And so when I saw that there were cultures, did you know in India, for example, the divorce rate in India is 1.5%.
And so many of them are arranged marriages. They're not what
It's
we would
like,
call love marriages. Yeah.
yes, 1.5. Like, that is unbelievable to me. Like, when I heard that, I went and checked, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's actually the statistics. Now, it's not that all their marriages are flourishing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important to understand that there are, like you said, there are different kinds of families. And to say that we're sort of stuck with this, almost 50% divorce rate. And, now in America, the US in particular, we're the number one country in the world when it comes to single parent families. We just passed Sweden.
Really?
What a
Wow.
disaster. Like, whatever's happening to family,
Huh.
we are ground zero. Like, whatever idea virus is destroying the family, it's the strongest right where you and I and everyone listening to this that's in the US, right where we live. So we have to be really careful about thinking that our ideas of family are the best ideas. Like, we have some really bad ideas.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, I love traveling to places like India and the Middle East. And it doesn't mean that we have to adopt everything that they're doing, but we have to get really humble about the fact that we've generated the worst culture in human history when it comes to like stability of the family. And so we got to figure this out.
You were talking about how it seems like the only thing that all sides can agree on as far as a high value is freedom.
Yeah.
And I think, like, even biblically, and we see this, it used to be the case, country-wise speaking, personal responsibility.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
I think you can make a strong argument that even biblically, higher than freedom is the value of personal responsibility. And I think there's two sides to that personal responsibility. First is a personal responsibility for myself. Like, I think Galatians 6:2, it says, bear one another's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ. And a couple verses later, each shall carry his own load. Like,
Yes.
I have a backpack that I'm responsible to carry that is not the job of anybody else to carry. But then that second part of responsibility, I think, is that first Galatians verse, Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ. I have a responsibility to other people as well.
Yeah.
And so something that, one of the phrases that I use in my household and in the youth ministry as well is, something doesn't have to be your fault to be your responsibility.
Ooh,
and the more and more people that we have that can look and say, okay, like, I didn't cause this, but I can help fix this.
Yeah.
That's where, and no political party is doing that.
No.
It's like assigning blame is the way to go. No, but saying like, hey, I want to run for president, and I pretty much can't solve anything.
That's right.
But you could, if you would just take some responsibility for yourself and for your community. So let's man, they're so passionate because I see this as well. One other thought, when you were talking about gaining wealth and purchasing loneliness.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm in the public schools here. I get to help with the Christian club in a couple different schools. And this year in our county, all of the schools made a rule that if they catch you with your phone out, they confiscate your phone, and then your parents have to come after school and pick it up. And what's really wild is it has changed my experience walking down the hallways of the school, because the kids' heads are up, their eyes are up, they're seeing each other and noticing each other. Whereas, like, the status used to be, I have this phone and all I can think about is my phone. And they would walk past hundreds of people staring into a phone. So, like, just even that depriving them during the school day is making them learn to associate and
Yes.
learn how to be a human.
How dare you guys take that freedom away from us poor
Yeah, no
kids? I
doubt.
mean, that, like, you're just imperialist, authoritarian, like adults to, this is the weird, like, this is the weird virus or kind of reaction that we have to having this hyper value of freedom. Like, I bet there are parents in the school that feel like this is an imposition on their child,
Yeah. Oh, they get
um,
mad.
it's like, come
Yeah,
on,
they do.
guys. Like, again, like think about all the values there, the value of education, the value of connection, like all of these things are being sacrificed on the altar of this impulsive freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And really what you're doing is by obsessing over that value, you're essentially handing your children over to billion-dollar tech companies to
Mm-hmm.
productize your children.
Yep.
This is what the ultimate or end result of this obsession with freedom that leads to loneliness is create, because there is an endless number of people who will be happy to sell us a product so that we can purchase more loneliness and isolation. Like that is happening, and our kids are being discipled into that in these rituals that they are being trained in by companies that could care less about them or about any of these transcendent values. What they care about is money. And we don't see this happening. So we have to get a lot more militant about these things.
Yeah. Jeremy, let's circle this back around. You were talking about your discovery of how throughout history, the best way to describe households and families would be like a multi-generational team. And so a team has to be about something and have a goal. And
Right.
when we talked about how throughout a lot of history, this would happen just for sheer survival, like that.
Right.
If we would not economically and health survive if we weren't a multi-generational team focused on the preservation and the propagation of our family and household. But now we are in an economy and in a culture where that's not completely necessary,
Right.
and also maybe not the greatest vision for your household anyway. So and biblically speaking as well, survival is not the highest ideal that we have.
Right.
So when you started looking and discovering this, what did you ultimately come upon? If you're trying to create a modern day multi-generational team from your family, what's the game? Like,
Yeah.
what do you do?
Yeah. Excellent question. Yeah. So I think it goes back to asking the question, what is the vision for the family? And really what the collision between survival, if you surpass survival, the next thing you have to have in order to continue to do something is a vision, right? So if you are desperately trying to, like, just get enough resources to be able to feed your family, okay, that's really difficult. But once you have enough resources to feed your family, then the next step from that is you have to have a vision for what to do with now our excess resources or excess food or excess time or excess so we have to make this transition successfully from being survival driven to being vision driven. And I think that part of where we go to find a vision, theologians oftentimes talk about this principle of first mention, which is that oftentimes in Scripture, the first time a new thing is being introduced, the theology behind that thing is also unveiled at the same time. And we have that really with the family. So the very first time we see the emergence of the family is in Genesis 1. And when God creates male and female, and then he says to them, he blesses them and says to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and rule over my creation. Well, that five-part mission is the vision for the family. This is why God created the family, is to be fruitful, multiply, fill, subdue, and rule. And so when we talk to our kids, or we talk about, like, what is the vision? Okay, guys, we are surviving. Like, we're not going to starve. We can choose to purchase loneliness or isolation if we want. Why would we choose to work together as a team? Well, what we are telling our kids is, guys, this family thing was his idea. This wasn't my idea. I think it's a good idea, but it wasn't my idea. And God created it. And then he gave us this 5-part mission to be fruitful, multiply, fill, subdue, and rule. My question to you guys is, can we do that better together, or would we do that better apart? And so to be fruitful is the very basic way to think about that is having children. To multiply is to have grandchildren. To fill is to really think about your family from a geographical perspective and sort of push the boundaries, right? Out, you're filling this area. To subdue is to take things under your influence, and to rule is to begin to exert the sort of kingdom values, our disciple making. And this is, I think, really Jesus recapitulated this 5-part mission in the Great Commission, right? He tells the disciples to be fruitful, which is to make disciples, to multiply, which is to make disciple makers, which is, he says there, teach them to obey everything I've commanded you, to fill. He says, go to all the nations. Then he says he tells them to subdue, which is to teach them to obey everything. And then to rule, the whole thing starts by him saying, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. So it's the same mission. And so we have these 5-part mission. And what we decided as a family is we just can do that way better together. I mean, our kids, they got married, started having kids right away. That's very difficult to do when you're isolated. Like if they're trying to multiply, and our desire, because part of our mission, me and my wife, we try to be fruitful. We have 5 kids. That was the maximum number of kids we could have, just physically, because of some things that happened. So we maximized the number of kids that we could have. And now all 5 of our kids are very excited about being parents, but we also realize that that's a lot of hard work on a young family, right? So my daughter, who is, who just, she's, just turned 22 yesterday, and she's having her first baby. Like, that's a lot to put on a young mom and her husband, and they've only been married for 10 months, right? So it's like they need support, they need help. And so that one of the things I love about this mission is that in reality, if your kids have kids early and often, then there is a bit of a survival need to be a family team, because it's economically really difficult for our kids. It's physically really difficult for the moms in particular, and just all the childcare needs. And you just see this epidemic of isolated moms and dads who are just drowning, especially if they have like 2 or 3 little kids in the house. It's incredibly exhausting. And if you look at our kids, our daughters, I mean, they are absolutely inundated with support. They have aunties. They got my wife who's available. I see my kids and try to help them every day. I'm coaching each of the sons in their businesses. Like, we can just do better as a team. The only thing that you have to give up if you're going to do that is your obsession with isolation and that kind of impulsive freedom we talked about earlier. If you're willing to put relationships first, then this is really a win-win. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? So yeah, you need a vision that's big enough for how to surpass a vision that's bigger than your own like isolation, your own obsession with comfort, your own obsession with freedom. And if you have that vision, then I think being a team makes a lot of sense, even post those survival needs.
Yeah. So would it be accurate to say that ultimately your vision is, as a family, how do we multiply disciples and make the community that we live in radically better because of our existence here? Yeah.
And when I die, we should just be getting started. And this is something I think for a lot of Americans, we don't understand, because one of the unfortunate legacies of individualism is I could care less about what happens to the world after I'm dead. The world started when I was born, and the world's over when I'm dead. And that's a terrible way to think, but that's a pretty typical way. I was just watching a podcast, and I was commenting on it. Very, very popular podcast, 2 guys who are very famous. And one of them said to the other, like, I don't care about what happens after my life because I'll be dead. I could care less about legacy. And I thought, that's a very understandable position for somebody that has been obsessed or immersed in the kind of culture we have. This hyper-individualism, this is one of the reasons why we will drive up the debt endlessly. Like, we don't care about what we do to the next generation. We care about bilking whatever resources we can from everywhere to benefit us individually. And we're not going to survive that move, unfortunately. I mean, there's going to be incredible upheaval to try to take us off of that perspective, because we need desperately to start thinking about the future. And I hope that God does a lot of amazing things in my lifetime, but I'm far more interested in what's going to happen after I'm gone. And my descendants, there's like 500 of my descendants, what are they going to be doing? Because the amount of fruit they could bear is, 500 times what I could do. So why wouldn't I invest in that? We do the same thing with disciple making. Like, we track our disciple making to the 4th generation. We're constantly investing in all 4 generations. We're constantly, every year, we make more disciples who make disciples, and we're watching that fruit. And we're very interested in what happens in the 4th generation. Now, some of those people we don't know. We get introduced to them, but it's like that is having, 100 times more impact on our city than anything that I can do. And so this was God's great idea. Multiplication was his idea, both in Genesis 1 and in Matthew 28. One of the things that we also happens when you become wealthy is you no longer care about multiplication. You can just purchase whatever you want for yourself. And so we
Wow.
become obsessed with addition strategies, both in the church and in the family. And we don't think about the power of multiplication. So that's, I think, our family's mission is we multiply multipliers, turning sons and daughters into fathers and mothers. And we do this like in the spiritual world, but in the physical world too. We care about both. But you have to keep your eye on, 100 years from now, that's where most of the fruit's going to actually come.
Jeremy, we've been talking pretty big picture on this kind of long-term vision for the why and what might happen over the long run. But at some point, we got to be really practical with how does this happen on a granular level? How do you go from big philosophy to transformational habits that help your kids see the vision and help you stay unified together? And one of the things that I know that you guys are really passionate about is a multi-generational meal. And this feels like an awesome week to talk about it, as like if somebody's listening to this in order, this is Thanksgiving week. And so in some level, most households in the United States have at least a one-day template for something like a multi-generational meal. And I understand a lot of them dread it, but for many people it's special. So what do you guys do, and what do you feel like is the goal for this multi-generational meal?
Yeah. This is our favorite tool. When people ask us, well, what's the one thing I could do that would completely transform my family from this sort of fragile Western family to this multi-generational family? I'm saying this is it. If you do this simple thing, if you get to this point, 3 generations, 1 table every week, you will transform your family for generations. 3 generations, 1 table every week. Now it takes time often to get to that 3rd generation. Some of that, sometimes you can unfold, your parents, but you can go downstream in the future. But if you ever get to that point where you have a 3 generation meal at 1 table every week, you will have transformed your family into a multi-generational team. It happens every time I see a family get to this point. But this is it's a challenge. There's a lot of things that stand in our way culturally to getting to this place. But yeah, what we recommend that people do is you start with just your 2 generations, and you begin to become and a lot of times when people hear us talk about meals, they sort of assume we're talking about that sort of weekday meal that a lot of people talk about with families, which is very important. But oftentimes what's happening at those sort of weekday meals is like the quick check-in, and then everybody, boom, takes off to their lives, or their busy homework, or their whatever else they're going to do that evening. But a multi-generational meal, this is a place where you have nowhere better to go, where everyone inhabits their family identity. There's a relaxed pace to it. It's almost timeless, where a son is a son, a daughter is a daughter, a father is a father, a mother is a mother. You experience and just bask in your familyness. You craft that experience really well. And a lot of the reasons why Thanksgiving is such a disaster is because practicing this once or twice a year is just not good enough. Like we're out of relationship with each other. And when you look at cultures that do this well, this is their favorite part of the week. This is the zenith. This is the peak moment. I mean, we lived in Jerusalem. People would just be streaming to their parents' house, 30, 40-year-olds with their kids. They'd all be heading to their parents' house on Shabbat. Friday night, this is kind of what happened in the culture. Everything's just sort of shut down. There'd be this Shabbat siren would go off. And if you just listen carefully, the only sound you could hear in Jerusalem was the sound of fathers chanting blessings over their children.
Wow.
And that was, when we saw that, we were just like, what? Like, like, are we allowed to do that? Do we have to be Jewish to like have a meal like this? Like, sign me up, we're not Jewish, but I was like, okay, let's try to do some kind of meal. And I don't think it has to be a Shabbat dinner, but that's how we do it. We did it Saturday night for a while. Some people do this on Sunday afternoon after church. Now we do ours on Friday night, and it does kick off a day of rest. But the meal itself, whether or not you actually practice a Sabbath day, man, the meal is incredibly valuable. And it got to the place where our kids, when they were older, like all of our kids, we homeschool our kids about 80% of the time, but they all pretty much 4 of the 5 of them spent a year in public school, made a lot of good friends, and did a lot of ministry there. But part of what all 4 of them, they were like, they did not, the biggest night for their public school, was we have an incredibly like competitive football team.
Mm-hmm.
The Friday night lights, but our kids, they wanted to always come to our house on the Sabbath. They wanted to bring all their friends over for Shabbat dinner. Um, it wasn't something they felt like they had to, but it was just, it is the place where we drink the deepest of pleasure. Like, it's just incredibly fun. And it's very difficult to become depressed or to get down about life when you're never more than, 6 days away from a family feast. And so that's what we practice. And so there's a lot of details to like putting this together. Just to give you one step, and then I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Okay.
But I would say the first thing I always tell people is, if you can make it like fun for your kids, that's always, like, to me, the first move. Like a family with like little kids, what we did, the first time, I was actually, we were probably at the lowest point in the history of our family in terms of like unity. Me and my wife April were struggling, to be really unified. We had 3 little kids. We were exhausted, and I was like, I was talking to her and said, remember when we lived in Israel, that like Shabbat dinner that those families would do? Man, could we do something like that? And so we were pretty burnt out, but I went and bought a bunch of sparkling grape juice to like kind of make this meal, special.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a single Sabbath dinner, and we broke out this grape juice. Well, by the time the next week came around, I was, we were in survival mode, and I had forgotten about this great idea I had to reestablish our Sabbath dinner. But one of my kids was like, "Hey, Dad, are we doing that thing again with the grape juice?" Because our kids were only drinking water. And so they reminded us, like, oh my gosh, that's right. And so I always tell people, if you can make it just really fun, or do something that makes it fun for your kids, like memorable, like they would like, and let them remind you. If you're in survival mode with a bunch of littles, like that's one way to kind of get this going. And without that, I don't know if we would still be doing that, but that's how it started for us, over 20 years ago. And now it's been like just building and building and building.
Now, I have some experience with this. I have a few experiences, and this might be helpful for people listening. My first was really learning about this and hearing while we were walking through a bone marrow transplant with my son, who had been in a 9-year cancer battle. And by God's grace, his brother was a perfect match. And so we had this period where we were isolated, because he went through the treatment, and then we got out, and we were living down in Miami, which is about 2 hours away from where we live. And we were basically bubbled. The Lord blessed us with a beautiful house to rent. And one day a week, or on the weekends, extended family would come down. And so because there was basically so little, most of our job was to rest and get him better. So we weren't running in a bunch of directions. We were actually having to shelter everybody in our family. We started with like full bore Sabbath meal Friday night, so like a script and prayers over everybody, and lighting the candles. And we even had communion during that time. And when I look back on my journals, these are still some of the most special times for us and the families and people that we had down. Now, when we moved back home, we sustained it for a bit of time, but then, you like miss a week for this and this and this. And then all of a sudden it's a lot of effort to get back into. And it was a lot on my wife, especially because she's having to prepare a tremendous amount. And so we would just really kind of quit doing it, but I missed it and I longed for it. And so we have worked to get back there, and we're not where that was. And I'm not exactly sure when and if we will be. But what we said is, okay, I got a son that's on the public school basketball team. We have no control over their schedule. I've got another son that works a job, and, we've got 3 teenage kids in our house. But when we look at our calendar, most of the time there's nothing happening Sunday night. And so I love the idea of Friday night to kick off a day of rest. But I know if it's Friday night, then at least every other Friday, I'm going to be missing my kids. So Sunday night. And so it's a like rejoice of the weekend, and let's look forward to what's ahead. And every Sunday night, they are welcome to invite any friends that they want to come join the table. And we put more effort into the meal. It's a longer meal. It's a longer time around the table. Everybody gets to check in. And we try to make it fun as well. And and then inviting in other extended family that are there. And, our hopes and goals is we've got a lot of widows at the church. We've got a lot of people. And so that's one as well. Like if you live in an area where your parents don't live, then there's a lot of people that need kids and grandkids in your churches. And so it's amazing to invite them in. So if somebody's, I think what you said is really important, Jeremy, because if somebody tries to start out with where you are now after years of practice, it's so much effort. It's almost like telling a 15-year-old with their learner's permit, go run out on the interstate, and go 30 miles. So I would love to go back to what are some best practices, for that starting in a sustainable way. What are some of the fun elements? What are some of the pieces that you say, this doesn't take a lot of effort and goes a really long way on the front end?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you guys are doing. I think picking the right night, like you said, like let's find a night that works for our family right now that we could do this and consistently. So yeah, the three moves in this order is where I think that this is when I've seen families kind of pull this off the best. So enjoyable, then sustainable, then meaningful. So you start by making it fun, make it enjoyable. If that's pizza night or whatever, like what your kids will love, what you will enjoy, then make it sustainable. That's where, if you need to do paper plates or whatever, you might have this epic vision of candlelit dinner, smoked meat or whatever. I love that vision. I live that vision, but that's not where we started. And so you want to start with something that's very sustainable. Imagine your craziest week and then coming up to this meal, what's going to cause you to pull the trigger? Like if we got to order Chipotle or, Uber Eats or whatever, like you need to find a way to pull this off. That feels sustainable. And you were mentioning like some of this just falls all on the mom, man, that's not sustainable. Like you got to find a way to avoid that. Almost every one of my friends now that has practiced this for 5 years or more, almost everyone with that exception, the dad makes the main dish. Like all of us have gotten into like cooking various kinds of meats and just like taking that off our wives because that has made it way more sustainable. And
for instance, I have time to do that on Sunday afternoon. I don't have time to do that on a weeknight very much.
Right. Well, that's what. So pick something where you, as the dad, can really contribute well to this. Another part of it is the cleanup. Like sometimes if you make a giant mess and you're like, wow, this is just we can't do this meal because of the after effects of the meal. And so part of what we try to do is, okay, how do we make sure it doesn't feel like work? So we do like a dance party, like we have music that's special. We all work together, to clean up. And now our kids, we have so many kids that our in-law kids and everything, they just blitz it. And my parents who just like, get to just totally relax. They are the guests of honor. My wife's mom and then my parents, they're telling stories. And so that last piece, sometimes in order to make this like more of a consistent rhythm, sometimes the issue is you just need to make it more meaningful. You're like, okay, we figured out enjoyable, we figured out sustainable, but it doesn't feel like we're really connecting. And so it doesn't feel like we're really experiencing the gospel. So what are those elements, And so, and we put together a little template for you guys. Cause sometimes you'll hear me say some of these things and it might go by fast, but an example is a blessing that you say over your sons and daughters, like write a blessing. So, it's at familyteams.com/meal. The blessing that we say over sons is, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. May he give you the faith of Abraham, the heart of David, and the righteousness of Christ as you build our family from generation to generation. We have a blessing we say over the daughters. I write these little cards and give them to my parents. We started by just looking for traditional blessings. Then we kind of made our own. You can make these as personal as you want. Lighting a candle is really cool. Kids love that. And we will often just speak the gospel over our family when we light the candle. Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is the real reason we can rest. Jesus did the really hard work for us so that we get to just enjoy one another. This is all because of what he did for us on the cross. And so rooting everything back in the gospel makes it meaningful. Family stories, like giving your parents prompts and helping them, figure out what are the stories that our family, like sometimes my mom will come to a Shabbat dinner and she'll be like, man, my my dad would be like 110 years old if he was still alive today.
Oh,
And I'd
wow.
be like, well, what, can you tell a story about my grandpa, your dad? Like what are some of the things? These are all dials: enjoyable, make it fun, sustainable, make it easy to pull off, meaningful. Like you can crank any of these dials. And if you crank them in that order and you just keep on working on it over the course of 6-12 months, you're going to find a groove for your family that is
Yeah.
so life-giving, and so peaceful. But you got to get sort of through the place where it becomes like there's a skill to it, right? And we want you guys to develop that skill.
I love that. And while you were talking, I added the family meal template link into the show notes. So,
Awesome.
however you're listening to this, if you scroll down to the resources mentioned, you'll find it there. You'll also find the other couple podcasts I've done with Jeremy, where we talk about family identity through everyday chores. That was a really helpful one for me. And then the other one we did on family as team. Jeremy, what would you say just for a family that's interested in getting into this um, in 6 months? If they can
Yeah.
get this in 6 months, what kinds of differences would you imagine in 6 months to a year that they might begin experiencing in their family?
Yeah. So the connections between generations will be much richer. And like I said, if there's only 2 generations, then that'll be rich. I would experiment with the third generation. If there's somebody that you could involve into it, even like once a month or once every 2 months, get better at that. Those connections will be much richer. But what's really going to start to happen is your kids will begin to feel that your family has an identity and has a culture, and their roots will go deeper and deeper into that family identity. And so what happens when you're with our kids is they are sort of at the mercy of just a lack of identity, and then having peers or having social media, having other things sort of imprint an identity on them, because families used to give children really strong identities, strong roots. They knew who they were. They knew where they came from. They knew what kind of but we don't have practices that are that strong. We don't have values that we're reflecting. We don't talk about where we came from or our stories. And so what's going to start to happen is your kids will start to sink their roots deeper and deeper into this family identity and into their gospel identity. If you practice that and talk about that at this meal, and that is going to create in them a totally different kind of like person, like a strength around their faith and around who you are as a family. And they're going to get it more and more excited about family, about what it means to be a son or a daughter. They'll be excited about the future potential of being a mother or father. They'll see you thriving and enjoying yourself at this meal. They'll enjoy it. And as they begin to think about their future, they're going to get excited. There's so many kids today that are just dreading the possibility of being a mother or father.
Mm.
And and this is where we are just seeing, this problem of like things like population collapse at the macro level, but at the micro level, kids are just really confused about like how to build a life, because they have never seen a thriving family. And so it just seems like a difficult thing for them to imagine. But if you start to have this moment in time every 7 days where you're experiencing your peak family, this is what's going to really propel the vision of the family. So relationships will be closer, connections will be deeper, identity will go deeper, and then I think a future vision is going to start to really emerge from a practice like this.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate you coming and sharing this vision. And again, if you're listening to this in the early part of Thanksgiving week, highly recommend download that family meal template from familyteams.com, and the links in the show notes. And you might even be able to put a couple of elements into place that would enhance your Thanksgiving. Any final things that you would want to share, or places that you would want to send them, Jeremy?
Yeah, we'd love to, if you guys need help with this, there's a lot of families that have really tried to figure this out. We've done a lot of these interviews on our podcast. I think that it's important. We've even, my daughter, she went and lived with an Orthodox Jewish family for 3 or 4 months. And then they came on our podcast and we interviewed them in terms of like even understanding the history of the Sabbath in their family. They have 8 kids. The place where we really learned these practices, we need to be, like we were saying earlier when Jay, you were in India, part of what we need to do is a little bit of a cultural archaeology.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are kind of at the sort of like at a dead end culturally when it comes to family. Like It's similar to the way we think about our diet. Family is just like, we're confused. And so we need some ancient wisdom. And so, yeah, finding that ancient wisdom is really important. I wrote a book called Family Revision, how ancient wisdom can heal the modern family. So, yeah, we need to tap into some of those threads. And I think that, and just start to receive. Yeah, I think your family will be super blessed if you start to find those threads and bring them back into your family.
Yeah. Amen, man. Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate you and all that you're doing to make families multi-generational teams on mission. So appreciate your time, Jeremy.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay.